You've heard of Margaret, I reckon, though maybe only in whispers. If not, well then listen close, because hers is a warning carved in blood and silence. It was 10 years after Daniel Weaver disappeared that Margaret Hale came through Blackwood, and still the hollow house stood with its windows gaping wide like sockets of a skull. Nothing grows in its shadow, and no bird dares rest upon its roof. Yet there it waits, year after year, until another fool crosses its gate. Margaret was no fool, at least not at the start. She was a schoolteacher from the south, plain in her ways and steady of hand. She came to us not out of curiosity, but necessity. Her sister had married a man from Blackwood and taken ill. Margaret meant to tend to her a while. Now she might have done just that and left safe enough, if only she had not taken to wandering in the evenings, notebook in hand like Weaver before her. For Margaret was fond of writing, though not for books or scholars. She kept journals, letters and sketches, the way some keep prayers. She said putting pen to paper helped her quiet her mind. In that habit was her undoing. One evening she sat with us in the tavern, and, as strangers do, she asked after local landmarks. No one answered. Then she pressed again, asking about the grand old house she'd glimpsed through the trees. The air turned colder than the ale in our mugs. Old Bram spat on the floor. I myself told her plain, best you forget you ever saw it. But you see, Margaret was not Weaver. She was not reckless, nor did she laugh at our warnings. Instead, she grew curious in the quiet way of those who cannot leave a question alone. She asked nothing more of us that night. Instead, she asked her sick sister the next day. And the day after that, she asked the children at the school. Whispers travel faster than footsteps, lad. And before a week had passed, she had gathered more than enough to lure her towards the gate. I learned this only after from the pages we found. Yes, pages. Her notebooks were left behind like breadcrumbs, as though the house wanted us to know just enough to dread what it had done. She went first in the daytime, when the sun was high and the woods less fearsome. Even then the gates swung open of their own accord, and she felt the air grow colder on her skin. She wrote of weeds taller than her waist, of the path choked with nettles, and yet how strangely straight it seemed, like a tongue leading into the mouth. She did not cross the threshold that day. No, she only walked the perimeter, peering at the shuttered windows, sketching the roof with its broken spires. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more. But her handwriting trembled where she confessed that she heard something faint and low, like a sigh slipping through the cracks. She should have stopped. She should have heeded the warnings etched in her own shaking script. But Margaret was steady. Remember, steady people are sometimes the worst. They mistake their composure for protection. She returned the next night. The clock tower had struck 11, and the moon was sharp as a sickle when she slipped out with her lantern. She left her sister sleeping, left her journals half full upon the desk. She meant, she wrote, to prove us wrong, to prove the stories were just stories. What she found was Daniel Weaver's fate waiting to be repeated. The gate yawned open once more. She stepped through. The lantern flame bent low as though afraid. The path swallowed her, and the door swung wide without her touch. Now, from here on, lad, I tell you what I read in her pages and what I heard whispered in my own dreams after, for such tales stain not just the page, but the soul. She wrote that the house breathed. The walls drew in and out, slow as a sleeper. The smell of wet earth clung to her. She thought of graves freshly turned. Now, from here on, lad, I tell you what I read in her pages and what I heard whispered in my own dreams after, for such tales stain not just the page, but the soul. She wrote that the house breathed. The walls drew in and out, slow as a sleeper. The smell of wet earth clung to her. She thought of graves freshly turned. The parlour greeted her with silence, and yet it was not empty. Figures stood there, waxen and pale, their eyes dark as pitch, the hollow ones. She wrote of how their heads turned toward her in unison, how their mouths opened wide, though no sound came. The air grew thick with their attention. She fled deeper, foolish, yes, but where else could she go? Behind her the door had vanished, as it always does. So up the staircase she went, her lantern guttering, her notebook pressed tight to her chest. Room after room she opened, and well, each was worse than the last. One held chairs in neat rows, each occupied by a hollow one staring at the wall. Another, a nursery filled with cradles rocking themselves, though no child lay within. From the ceiling she heard soft thumping, like something crawling on the beams above. And then, lad, here is where her hand shakes most on the page. She found the child's room. Always it comes back to that cursed chamber. The girl sat waiting on the bed, her dress faded, her eyes bottomless. She smiled sweetly and she said the words Daniel Weaver had heard before. "You've come back." "You've come back." Margaret denied it, of course. She said she was no such person, that she was only a visitor. But the girl's mouth stretched into a grin too wide, too sharp. "The house remembers," she said. "It waits, it hungers, and now it has you. The house remembers, it waits, it hungers, and now it has you." The walls pulsed, shadows unfurled like fingers. Margaret wrote that she felt the hook in her chest, a pull so strong she nearly stepped forward willingly. But she was stronger than Weaver, at least for a while. She threw her lantern, shattering the window, and she leapt. The fall broke her body, but not her will. She crawled through the weeds, leaving blood behind her like breadcrumbs. Somehow she reached the road. We found her at dawn, face pale as milk, clutching her torn notebook. Unlike Weaver, Margaret still had her voice. For 3 days, she told us what she'd seen. Her words shook us, for they matched what Weaver had written years before. The same rooms, the same hollow ones, the same child who called strangers home. Unlike Weaver, Margaret still had her voice. For 3 days, she told us what she'd seen. Her words shook us, for they matched what Weaver had written years before. The same rooms, the same hollow ones, the same child who called strangers home. She begged us to burn the house, to tear down its stones, but we could not. No flame takes there, no hammer cracks its bones, the house abides. On the 4th night, Margaret grew silent. She would not eat, would not sleep. She only stared at her own reflection, whispering that her eyes looked darker than before. On the 5th, she was gone. Slipped from her sister's bed, walked barefoot through the streets, out to the trees. The gates welcomed her. We did not follow, none ever do. At dawn the gates were shut. Her body was not found. But her notebook lay upon the threshold, the last page scrawled with words that chilled us all. I am hollow now, the house keeps what it claims. I'm hollow now, the house keeps what it claims. And so, lad, that is the story of Margaret Hale. Another name on the roll of the forgotten, another soul swallowed whole. And so, lad, that is the story of Margaret Hale. Another name on the roll of the forgotten, another soul swallowed whole. You ask me why we do not leave Blackwood, why we do not burn the house down or abandon the land. But you do not understand. The house is not built upon our soil. Our soil is built upon it. The town clings like moss upon the stone of its foundation. We are all living in its shadow, whether we admit it or not. And if you are wise, you will leave before it learns your name. For once the hollow house whispers it, you will hear it until the day you step through those gates, and then you will never return. So warm yourself well by this fire, lad, and walk the road before dawn. Do not linger, do not look back, for I have seen the way your eyes wander when the wind sighs through the trees, and I fear the house has already begun to listen.